I was at the mall holding my son's hand when Karen decided that it didn't make sense for a black woman to have a blonde child. Before I could take a breath, she was already on the phone to the police. The end? She looked like shit. Life has a funny way of testing our patience when we least expect it. In my case, it was on a sunny day at the mall, where all I wanted to do was buy a present for my sister's birthday and have a coffee with no big surprises. But of course, the universe had other plans. My 6-year-old son was by my side, holding my hand as he always did in crowded places. He's blonde with light eyes, one of those boys who looks like he's just stepped out of a margarine commercial. And for some reason, that bothered some people more than it should have. The toy store was full, children running around, parents trying to keep their sanity while choosing dolls, cars, and everything that cost 3 times as much as it should. My son was excited, pointing at the toys and asking if we could take an extra 1 or 2 just in case. That's when I felt her eyes on me. It was that specific look, the look of someone who has already decided that something is wrong with you before you even know their name. At first, I tried to ignore it. There are people who simply have nothing to do in life, apart from snooping on other people's existence. But the more we walked around the store, the more I felt that woman's presence. When we got to the checkout line, there she was, right behind us, holding a toy without even seeming interested in it. That's when I heard a loud sigh, and a question directed at no one in particular. It's really absurd what some people do these days. That was it. It wasn't a common complaint. It was the kind of phrase that is thrown to the wind, waiting for someone to take the bait. I pretended not to hear, but my son, lacking the malice to understand that sometimes silence is golden, turned to look. That was enough for the woman to step forward, her eyes fixed on me. That boy? Where's his mother? For a second I blinked, confused. Then I realized she wasn't asking out of politeness. It wasn't innocent curiosity. It was an accusation disguised as concern. And I knew right then and there that the day was about to get very interesting. I've seen a lot in my life, but the level of certainty that certain people have in their own ignorance always impresses me. I knew what was going to happen. I knew she couldn't just ignore it, because people like her don't just think crap. They need to act on the crap they think. And that's how, in less than 5 minutes, I heard the phrase that made me want to laugh and break something at the same time. "Hi, are you from the police? I think I'm witnessing a kidnapping." I didn't turn around immediately. Not because I hadn't heard it, but because the level of absurdity was so great that my brain needed a second to register that it was, in fact, happening. Kidnapping. She said kidnapping. I looked at my son. He was crouched down, staring in amazement at a set of trolleys in the store window. He didn't even notice the theater that was about to begin. I took a deep breath and turned around slowly. She was holding her cell phone in the typical pose of someone who feels they are about to be named heroine of the day. Her gaze fixed on the screen, her lips pressed together in concentration, as if she were reporting a terrorist attack, and not, I don't know, a mother with her child buying toys. The people around her began to notice. First, just a few corner glances, that typical human instinct to pick up on impending drama. Then, there were whispers. In a shopping mall, it doesn't take long for a problem to become public entertainment. The most ridiculous thing was that, if she really believed my son was in danger, she would have spoken to me first. But no, she didn't ask anything. She didn't look at me before deciding that it was necessary to involve the authorities. She knew I would listen. She wanted me to listen, because the aim wasn't to protect anyone, it was to humiliate me. And it worked, in parts, because nothing, absolutely nothing, prepares a mother to be accused of stealing her own child in the middle of a crowded shopping mall. I tried to control my breathing, but my heart was already racing. Within seconds, I was invaded by that old fear. That fear we learned to carry since childhood. That fear that says, no matter how right you are, you can always be treated as wrong. She spoke quickly, gesturing with her free hand, her posture full of importance. Yes, blonde. blue eyes. He looks nothing like her. He's too quiet. Too quiet. That's funny. If my son had been crying, she would have said it was because I had hurt him. Since he was calm, the story now was that he was in shock, unable to react. Her mind had already decided that I was guilty. The rest was just building a plot to justify the narrative. And then, the icing on the cake. She took 2 steps to the side and pointed her finger at me. The finger. There was no ignoring it. All eyes were on me now. It was official. The woman had just turned me into a criminal. If there's one thing I've learned throughout my life, it's that the truth isn't always enough when someone has already decided what they want to believe. And that woman had already decided. It didn't matter that my son was relaxed, that he held my hand minutes before, that he called me Mommy every 2 minutes. None of that fit the story she wanted to tell. She didn't want to save a child. She wanted to save her own worldview. The problem is that when someone points a finger and makes a serious enough accusation, the people around them stop to watch. That's what happened. In a matter of seconds, I became the center of a spectacle that I never asked to be part of. First, the stares, then the whispers. An older woman frowned, pulling her bag closer to her body, as if I was about to rob everyone. A couple passing by stopped in the middle of the road, confused, trying to work out whether they should worry or just carry on shopping. And then, the first blow. A security guard appeared. He approached slowly, but with that posture of someone who already has the solution before even understanding the problem. Tall, strong, with a radio strapped to his waist. It wasn't the police, but for that woman, it was reinforcement. I felt my heart rise to my throat, not because I had done anything wrong, but because I knew what could happen when a situation like this got out of hand. I saw the security guard speak to her first. Of course he did. I heard her voice get sharper, firmer, full of indignation. She pointed at me, then at my son, then at me again, as if she were explaining the most obvious of crimes. He looked at me. I saw the conflict in his eyes. He didn't want to be there. He didn't want to deal with it. But he also didn't want to ignore a report and then find out the next day that something really had gone wrong. The difference was that the wrong was happening now, and I was the victim. My son, still oblivious to everything, turned to me holding a trolley in his hand. "Mommy, can I take this one?" And that's when I saw it. That woman went pale. She heard it. She listened. And for the first time, she doubted her own story. But now it was too late. The security guard was already walking towards me, and my day was about to get worse. The security guard walked towards me with that neutral expression that only makes everything worse. An emotionless, calculated face, as if he was trying not to show that he had already made up his mind. I knew exactly what was going on in his head. It's better to ask than to ignore it and complicate things later. For him, it was just protocol. A small inconvenience before moving on with the day. For me, it was yet another reminder that the world would always find a way to put me in the wrong role. He stopped in front of me, his hands on his waist, the radio on his belt beeping from time to time. I knew what was coming before he even opened his mouth. "Ma'am, can I talk to you for a moment?" I wanted to laugh, or shout, maybe both at the same time. But the problem with these situations is that any wrong reaction can turn into ammunition against you. If I lost my temper, I'd become the aggressive woman. If I got too calm, I'd be, "I suspect you're trying to control yourself." There was no right way out of it. The woman, of course, was right behind him, with her arms crossed and a look of satisfaction on her face. She was enjoying the scene. The security guard started with the obvious questions: who I was, what I was doing there, how that child was with me. He asked for a document. I handed it over. My last name was different from my son's. Of course it was. His father is white. And I saw the exact moment when this became another reason for them to doubt me. It was at that point that my whole body tensed up. Because if even with my son calling me mother there was still doubt, then the issue was never about proof. It was about perception. And misperceptions have killed too many people in this country. Meanwhile, my son looked at me, confused. He didn't understand why that man was asking me so many questions, why that woman was so interested in him. His innocence was still intact, and as much as I wanted to protect it, I knew I wouldn't be able to forever. Because one day he would realize. He would realize that his mother needed to prove things that other mothers didn't. The security guard seemed satisfied with the answers. The story matched. There was nothing to question. He turned to the woman. He said something I couldn't quite hear, but the tone wasn't what I wanted. It wasn't accusatory. It wasn't indignant. It was just apathetic. Because for him, this was never a real problem. It was just another disagreement. And I knew she wasn't going to get a scolding. No consequences, no public shame. After all, she was just worried. And that's the excuse that allows situations like this to keep happening. I'd like to say that she apologized, that she realized her mistake, that she was ashamed, that she recognized how absurd it was to call the police because a black mother was walking with her white son. But that didn't happen. She just stood there with her arms crossed, looking at the security guard as if she expected him to try a little harder, as if there was still a chance that he would find a mistake in my story, a detail that would confirm that his instinct was right. The security guard sighed wearily and took a step back, muttering something about how there was nothing wrong. There was no apology, no attempt to make amends for the public humiliation I had just endured. For him, it was over. Just another misunderstanding. The look on the woman's face changed from indignation to embarrassment, not because she understood the mistake, but because the attention was now on her. Some people had stood there the whole time, watching. Others passed by, not quite understanding what had happened, but realizing that something didn't smell right. And for the first time, I saw a hint of doubt on her face. That nagging doubt that comes when you're not sure if you're still the good guy. But of course, she wasn't going to admit anything. She just fiddled with the strap of her bag, straightened her coat, and left, without an apology, without even looking me in the eye. She walked away quickly, as if she were running away from her own mistake, as if her mere absence was enough to erase what she had just done. The security guard stood there for a few more seconds, perhaps waiting for me to say something. But I had nothing to say. I just wanted to get out of there with my son, to pretend that it had never happened, even though I knew I couldn't do that. I grabbed my wallet, paid for the trolleys my son had chosen, and left the mall without looking back. On the way home, he asked me why that man had asked me so many questions. Because some people don't understand some things properly, I said, trying to find a way to explain without destroying his innocence for good. He seemed to accept the answer and turned his attention back to the trolleys. But I knew that, sooner or later, he would figure it out. And I could only hope that, when that day came, the world would be a slightly less stupid place than it is now. Have you ever been through something like this? Or seen it happen to someone else? Let me know in the comments. I want to hear your story. And if you like this video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like it. It helps me a lot to keep bringing you more stories like this. Want to see more shocking stories like this? Click on the card and don't waste any time. See you in the next video.